try to have, rather be. It's not what you want that you attract. You attract what you believe to be true. Neville Goddard. The very act of wanting implies separation, as in we are asking for something that we don't already have. You might ask, isn't that the whole point of manifestation? The implied meaning of wanting in its traditional sense is to seek fulfillment. We want because there's a need to fill a void, and through acquisition of that what we want, we ultimately get that fulfillment. You want food when you're hungry, so you use food to fulfill hunger. However, this only applies to 3D logic. From a fourth dimensional or spiritual perspective, however, you get food when the hunger gets fulfilled. Causality gets reversed. If you really analyze what we are ultimately seeking in wanting something, is that we are really asking for a feeling as a consequence of acquiring that object of our wanting. When we delegate too much meaning in this object of our desire, that very object becomes our sole source of that feeling. However, since feelings ultimately create this reality, we are often stuck in this perpetual deadlock with our desires, where our desires wait for us to feel in 4D, and we wait for our desires to feel in 3D. The quote that I mentioned earlier, it's not what you want that you attract. You attract what you believe to be true, might seem a bit confusing to some of us. You might ask, isn't the whole point of doing these practices is so that we end up believing ourselves to be in a state that aligns with what we want, one that is different from our current ones? When you believe something is about to happen, then there's some implied wanting for it. However, when we believe that something has already happened, then you cannot want it anymore. Therefore, we are aiming for the state of the desire fulfilled, rather than the state of our desire about to get fulfilled. There's a significant difference between the two. When we nurture the feeling of expectation as a consequence of about to happen, we end up getting more of that feeling of expectation. On the other hand, when we nurture the feeling of fulfillment, it is done, then we end up getting fulfillment. See, most of us try to manifest things that we do not have, which sounds logically valid and aligns perfectly with the message delivered by hustle culture and its adjacent themes of struggling for success, hard work, no pain, no gain. However, this is paradoxical from a feeling standpoint, since we must bask in the feeling of satisfaction of already achieving our desires. This is what I meant when I stated that this quote could be misinterpreted, since words like wanting, desiring, asking, believing are often used interchangeably, resulting in more confusion rather than clearing our existing doubts. So in the part, you attract what you believe to be true, Neville really spoke of a specific kind of belief, the belief of it is done rather than the belief of about to happen. States: embodying versus acquiring. Traditionally speaking, when we acquire something, we become its owner. The gap between us and the object we own become narrower relative to when we did not own it. Perhaps in terms of 3D or Neville's world of Caesar, owning and becoming might be used interchangeably with being in a broader sense. However, at the quantum level, there's still this implied separation between us and what we own when we own something and not be it. The gaps aren't fully closed. When we embody something, we actually become it, and there's no separation between us and our desires. Now, you might ask, if you want an object, say in a house, how do you become a house? Well, we aim towards becoming the owner of the object. There's a difference between trying to become the owner of a house and trying to own or attract a house. Our I amness or God interprets the two differently. When I first stumbled upon Wayne Dyer's quote, "You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are," it did not strike a chord with me simply because I assumed it was one of those obscure, profound sounding sayings that was all about discussing our limitations, the very limitations we are trying to transcend. However, every single person who've consciously manifested ultimately become their manifestations, despite their initial attempt of trying to acquire it. Have you ever imagined yourself with the object of your desire for a few minutes, only to come back with disappointment? Did it feel like you were trying too hard, or that it seemed a little too far-fetched, or even out of your league? Well, that's because you were trying to bring the desire to your reality. You were trying to attract it to your current, unchanged version of self, who has basked in the state of its absence for too long. It's a bit like trying to mix water and oil. No matter how hard you shake them or try to mix them, they eventually separate out as visible layers. Even if you draw your desire to the vicinity of your current self, you're going to eventually find yourself incompatible at some level. So the change you're aiming for must be done at the level of identity and not at the level of ownership. You aren't trying to bring something external to your current version of self, embodying the state of a person to whom the object of your desire seems like a natural extension of that very person. So if you are enough already, why is it not enough to have your desire? Why is change even necessary? Remember, you are merely changing the state which the real you or consciousness is occupying the 3D with. The you currently associate yourself is merely a shadow of the pure version of consciousness that is you. The real you is not just enough, but infinite. The egoic you, however, is limited by conscious design. This was done to enjoy this 3D experience of life. This egoic you, made up of flesh and bones, is a state the real you occupies, as Neville says, and hence not the real you. Different states you occupy will have its own corresponding set of experiences. State A will have its own experience set A. State B will have its own experience set B. But to be in state B with the expectation of enjoying experience set A is to fail to acknowledge the limitations of a 3D reality which has been consciously put in place with a well-intended purpose. So it's not that consciousness itself is limited, rather this solid 3D reality presents itself in such manner. So to revise, focus on the feeling of being rather than acquiring. Ask yourself this: who would I be if I had the object of my desire? You would notice that if you embodied the identity of the owner, you wouldn't necessarily be feeling excited to have your desire. You would rather find yourself basking in a calm, serene feeling which is not intense, for intensity would imply that it is something out of the ordinary relative to your identity. If you're trying to manifest $1 million as a poor person, you would feel shocked when that money comes around. However, if you embody the state of being a millionaire, the money would be a natural extension of you. If you loved this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to my channel for more such content. Thank you for watching.